All right, folks, welcome to the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest-running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. Just about 13 years we've been doing this podcast. This coming April, it's great to be in your ears if you're listening to the podcast show on whatever audio podcast platform you are listening to us on. If you're watching on YouTube, hello to you. Hope you're doing well. Share and subscribe out there. We'd greatly appreciate it. I'm Jeff Warren, and we got a bit of a different show this week as we are starting off specifically talking about the NFL draft coming up, talent within this draft. And we've got one of our great friends from A to Z Sports. He specifically hones in on the NFL draft, NFL content as well. Our good friend, Joe DeLeone. My friend, how you doing? And thanks so much for jumping on.
Doing great. It's been a little bit slow in the regard of draft commentary, but there's been just so much happening in the NFL world.
Absolutely.
That has made it super chaotic, as the month of March always is.
Yeah.
Before the draft kicks off at the end of April.
Yep, absolutely. We're going to get into a bunch of draft talk, but really quick, and honestly, I didn't give you the topics with regard to free agency, but it's been crazy. Free agency has been absolutely crazy in the NFL this year. I feel like it's been a little more insane, and maybe it's because of the Max Crosby storyline. I just think it's been absolutely insane what's been happening in free agency here.
Yeah, there's been a lot of money spent across the board, and I feel like there's a lot of teams that have been very, very aggressive in trying to address a lot of their needs. I think it's always just really easy for us to see these gigantic deals, but when we contextualize the cap going up as much as it does every single year, it went up 22 million this past year. It makes sense. And then eventually, once we get that full scope, it's really not much of a, large percentage of the cap in the aftermath.
Absolutely. Well, look, as a Philly sports podcast show here, and again, the longest running Philly sports podcast show out there, my co-hosts, myself, our listeners, we want to make sure that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be going back to the Super Bowl at some time. Who the hell knows if that's actually going to happen? Because, man, it's so difficult to remain relevant in the NFL year after year after year. Some teams are able to do it well. Other teams are just trying to get a bite of that apple at times. But to do what teams like the Patriots or teams like even the Broncos at this point and the Eagles have done, you need to have stability at the quarterback position. And I know that sounds obvious to everybody who is listening to this, but it's easier said than done. And right off the bat, in terms of this draft here, Joe, I guess the question on everybody's mind is whether or not Fernando Mendoza is the real deal coming into the NFL when he inevitably is drafted, and if he's going to be able to transition well to the NFL. But I also think that the real question concerning him and even other quarterbacks as well, but particularly with Mendoza, is he a culture changer? Because that's what teams inevitably need and want with their quarterbacks. We see time and time again quarterbacks drafted who aren't a culture change type of quarterback. I mean, I think we've seen that with Kyler Murray. I mean, he's moving on to perhaps greener pastures, maybe his situation wherever he's going to be landing next, which I think maybe Minnesota. Maybe that's going to be best for him in terms of culture changing. But I just view NFL quarterbacks anymore as having to absolutely change the culture of an organization, of an offense. Do you think, Joe, that Fernando Mendoza is going to be able to shift the culture to whatever team drafts him, presumably the Raiders, as he's being mocked to? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest impact here for Mendoza, because a lot of people talk about how he's not as crazy gifted and talented as a Caleb Williams or a Cam Ward.
Yeah.
His upside might not be to becoming a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, which is usually what you kind of swing for with the first overall pick. But the bigger benefit is the floor that he brings. And not only does it come from his accuracy, his decision-making, his poise, I feel like it does come from who he is as a leader. It's one of the things that always gets talked about. You just listen to the kid talk. I always love, for quarterbacks specifically, I always love listening to press conferences with them, because that is very definable on determining how they're going to lead a locker room. Like even guys like maybe that aren't super outspoken, like Lamar Jackson, you listen to him talk and you could tell that he's the type of guy that would be incredibly likable, and then his teammates would be really able to rally around him. You brought up Kyler Murray. He's the inverse of this. His interviews leading up to the draft were incredibly concerning. He kind of came off as standoffish and unengaged and almost like he was being forced to be everywhere he was. Mendoza to me feels like he is excited a million times over to be talking football, to be playing football, to be just around football. He almost feels like one of these dudes that if he wasn't a first overall pick and wasn't a top prospect, who would probably take a swing to just find a way to remain around the sport. I think that Mendoza absolutely is that type of guy. And it's what the Raiders need right now. They just haven't
Yeah.
had some sort of franchise altering force that at the very least is going to rally the troops and get everybody around him to flow in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. Look, as somebody who is a Penn State fan, and I saw what Mendoza did to Penn State this past year, and just like you mentioned, the poise that he has, I think, is pretty special for somebody his age. Usually, players like that are able to find some level of success in the NFL, and I think that may be coming his way. But as we look to the talent in this draft as well, from an offensive standpoint, hoping we can get into some of these offensive, explosive players in this upcoming draft as well. Guys, you may have been watching throughout the college football season, players I've been watching throughout this college football season as well. I mean, Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame, towards the top of this list in terms of explosive offensive players coming out of this draft. Carnell Tate from Ohio State, wide receiver. He's absolutely explosive as well. So I'm wondering, which offensive players are those explosive difference makers that we really need to be continuing to keep our eyes on within the first couple rounds of this year's draft, in your opinion, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we're talking about in terms of like which guys are really offense shifting, there's really only one player to me that I turn to, and that is Jeremiah Love. He
Yeah.
is going to be the most prime desired prospect amongst any of the offensive players. I think that there's a lot of guys across the board that look like that they can be solid, impactful guys, especially at receiver. There's a lot of the secondary receivers. There's a lot of guys that are going to be the second option for a team that maybe already has that primary target. But Jeremiah Love is the one dude who is going to maybe reset the course of a franchise's success. I think that a lot of teams in the top 10 are going to be considering taking him because you throw him into the mix. It can help a core with a young quarterback and an improving offensive line. Like Tennessee Titans to me are the one team that's the most intriguing for taking him because they have been aggressive a little bit in reworking their defense and making some moves in order to establish an identity around what Rob Saleh is trying to build. Defensive minded coaches love running the football. And I would imagine that someone like Jeremiah Love it could be that dude who ends up taking them to another level. And it really, to me, feels like with all these rest of these offensive skill position prospects, that he should be the guy who ends up leading the discussion for offensive rookie of the year. It's just not a crazy, sexy class for playmakers. And
Yeah.
Jeremiah Love just makes too much sense if he ends up being healthy and playing a full season.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as we're moving along here, I wanted to also dive into, I think, a theme that may not be getting enough attention. And maybe I'm wrong about this, quite frankly, because I think we, as football lovers watching this game, we know the game evolves over time. And there are differences when it comes to defensive play. There's differences when it comes to offensive play over the years. There's adaptations. And we continue to see NFL teams who dominate in the postseason, who really build towards dominance in the trenches. We certainly saw that with the Eagles and what they did in their Super Bowl run a couple years ago. The Seahawks did it this past year. I mean, just absolute dominance in the trenches in order to win championships. I mean, the NFL postseason is just trench warfare, it seems, anymore, Joe. And I'm wondering, do you think we're seeing somewhat of a transformation of trench-based players being more of a priority in the draft than perhaps some offensive skill players than we've seen in previous years? I don't know. Do you think there's that shift in the change of draft strategy with some teams as we're seeing how important the trenches really are and even the depth within those trenches? What are your thoughts on this here?
Well, I feel like just generally football, the most important thing has always been the talent that you have along both lines of scrimmage. Having good offensive linemen and defensive linemen is the key to success. And I think that naturally the best teams that put together strong, cohesive units are going to be the ones that are the most successful. There's always going to be a premium on making sure that you're going to be able to win along the lines. And I always think, and I always push for, I'd much rather build from the inside out. I think that jumping the gun on, maybe getting a big time running back, a big time receiver, tight end, especially on offense specifically, jumping the gun in that regard before building up your offensive line is a misguided approach. You should
Yeah.
always try to
Yep.
bolster and build up as much protection as possible. And I think naturally the NFL has its ebbs and flows and play style and approaches for how teams operate and the most successful teams operate. It definitely feels like right now the best teams in the NFL are the ones that are running the ball really well, that have big, solid, impactful offensive lines. Those are the groups that are finding success. So having those dudes, just you mentioned the Seahawks, easy example because they drafted Gray Zabel last year. I
Yeah.
would pay close attention to, which teams target Vega Ione from Penn State who could have a similar type of an impact. Who
Yep.
looks at Spencer Fano or Monroe Freeling. There's a lot of solid offensive linemen this year, and I think that this offensive line class maybe gets a bit mischaracterized. There's enough players that I think could present an impact that takes a team over the top for their first season in the league.
Yeah, great answer to that too, because and it just amazes me, Joe, how there are certain teams out there, and one being, whether it's the New York Jets, they just can't seem to get it together when it comes to the trenches, when it comes to the stability of what an offense or even a defense really should be. It just amazes me that there are certain teams out there that maybe they try and maybe they miss, but it seems like, man, you're just missing all the time. It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, no, I think there definitely needs to be more consistency there, and it's one position that it's one side of the ball just in a long line of scrimmage. Regardless, like you can never go wrong adding a good player on your offensive line or defensive line.
Absolutely, folks. We're going to take a break here, but when we get back, we got a lot more draft talk coming your way with Joe, and we're also going to dive into what should the Eagles maybe do in terms of the pass rush as well. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a bit. All right, we are back with our good friend Joe DeLeone from A2ZSports.com. He really hones in on NFL content and NFL draft. And as we are talking about the upcoming NFL draft in April here, Combine, wrapped up a short time ago here. And a lot of us are really trying to figure out, which players are kind of rising up the charts, which players are falling here. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Again, it's early in this process as we're starting to look at a lot of the talent that's coming out. But just wanted to do some spitballing with you here in terms of players and talent whose stock is rising and falling. So I'm wondering which players, since the end of the college football season, Joe, up until now, which player's stock is rising, do you think, at this point in time?
Yeah, the one guy that's rising the most is Monroe Freeling, the left tackle from Georgia. Strong testing performance. He really reminded everybody that he's a big, tall, long athlete. Wouldn't typically go in the top 10, I would think, in most other drafts, but he's really the most premier left tackle this year. And I think he's the most logical guy that could be the first left tackle off the board over Caleb Lomu, who's the Utah left tackle.
Yeah.
I think that combine performance really established and solidified that he will end up going somewhere in the top 15. To me, Freeling has been the biggest riser and came out of nowhere that he has moved up boards this quickly. It really wouldn't shock me if he ends up being maybe even a top 5 pick.
Really? Okay. I in all honesty, I was thinking, maybe the New York Giants would want to get your beloved New York Giants. Maybe I don't know. I feel like sometimes I feel like the Giants are going to end up needing some sort of offensive line help at some point down the road. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Well, they already they've got Andrew Thomas and they just brought back Jermaine Illuminor.
They did. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, they brought back Jermaine Illuminor, but they might go guard. I think that somewhere in the second round, maybe they would consider taking a guard. But right now they've got a lot of needs at corner and receiver.
Oh, absolutely.
And safety, defensive back that they need to address.
I forgot about that signing right there. But look, I'm wondering what players whose stock are falling right now, and especially after the combine. Is there anybody on your radar there?
Yeah, the one guy that I'm just a little perplexed on where he's going to go is Jermod McCoy, the corner from Tennessee. Didn't play at all this year. He's coming off of an ACL injury that he suffered last offseason, last January. It's been a really long time. He didn't do any drills at the NFL Combine. He's supposed to do his pro day. And it kind of reminds me of last year, Will Johnson, who was far and away the most talented cornerback in the class. There was no debate. His film was the best, but he fell to the second round because of injury concerns and also like a lack of availability during the pre-draft process. It just, the inavailability of information pushed down his stock, where I think teams wanted to go with guys that they had a little bit more clarity on. And I think the same thing applies here for Jermod McCoy. Maybe a lot of this could get dispelled during his pro day, but to choose to not participate at the combine, I think rose some questions that, hey, is there something we're missing here? Is the recovery timetable been slower? People were hoping that he could have come back during the season. He should have been able to come back during the season, and he was not able to. So something seems a little bit weird that it's been this slow. I think McCoy, if there is the one unexpected name that goes somewhere in the second round instead of early in the first, it would probably be him.
All right, very good. As we're moving along here, we love talking about late round gems that sometimes get overlooked in the draft. Philadelphia Eagles, and there are other teams out there as well, been really good over the years at finding these type of players, these day 3 players who turn into pretty productive NFL players. So I'm wondering, Joe, which do you think there are any, quote, day 3 players, guys that you've been looking at thus far that are going to be, maybe 6th, 7th round guys, that could actually be gems perhaps in the NFL? Anybody at this point that you have your eyes on?
There's 2 guys that I really like as my kind of later round gems. One is Damon Claiborne, the small shifty running back from Wake Forest. Now, he had a fumbling problem this past year, so he's got to clean that up. He's got to be much better protecting the football, especially if he's going to be used maybe as receiving, space killing type of a weapon to that degree. But Claiborne just has a lot of juice, and he's got really great pickup, and he's going to kill you if you give him space to operate. Not a guy who's going to be an every down running back, but could be just a really nice complementary piece as a second or third running back in a running back room. The ideal guy for a team that likes to attack space and just get their best athletes, deploy them as creatively as possible. And then I really like Caleb Proctor from Southeastern Louisiana. He tested really well at the NFL Combine. I think a lot of people are starting to become privy to him and what he brings to the table. Leaner defensive tackle prospect. He's been needing to bulk up a little bit. To me, he reminds me a lot of Milton Williams in the regard that Milton Williams went late to the Eagles and became just a dynamite interior pass rusher because he was leaner, he was lighter, he was quick, he was flexible, just was so good as a pass rusher. His impact shows up on the biggest stage, and then it gets him a really big contract, and then he becomes one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL and justified that signing with what he did for the Patriots. I think that if we're talking about like in not 2 years, if by the time he gets his second contract, Caleb Proctor is one of the highest paid defensive tackles in that free agency class that he's in, it wouldn't shock me. I think that he's got a lot of talent.
Yeah. All right. Well, buddy, before I let you go here, wanted to dive into some Philadelphia Eagles talk since we are a Philadelphia sports podcast show. And for those of you who are listening and you're going to be continuing to listen, especially with our next guest, Josh Shuster from Philadelphia Soccer Now, as we get into some Philadelphia Union talk, and we just dive into some Eagles, Phillies, and Flyers talk as well. I actually recorded that part of our podcast discussion here this week with Josh before Joe and I got on here. And at that point, when Josh and I were recording, the Eagles hadn't made any moves. So you're going to hear a discussion with Josh and I where the Eagles hadn't made any moves, and we were a little disappointed. But since the Eagles have certainly made some free agent acquisition moves. But in terms of talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and what they're really going to need to continue building, especially from a defensive perspective, because they have lost defensive talent, especially Jalen Phillips, lost him in free agency. From a pass rushing standpoint, Joe, the Eagles, they're going to need to draft and develop young talent in the future. That's obvious here, I think. And they're drafting at number 23 overall in the first round. They have 9 total draft picks here in 2026. 4 picks in the top 100. I'm wondering, are there some pass rushers and talent that you think the Eagles really could pursue in the draft that would make sense for this team in terms of Vic Fangio, his defense that he's running, and what this team's going to need down the road?
Yeah, I would imagine that picking where they are in the first round, that they're essentially going to be in a position to just take which of the second tier pass rushers that they like the most. And the guys that are in that group, a lot of different body types. Keldrick Falk, I feel like wouldn't make as much sense, but there's an argument there to be made. He's very talented, long athlete, wasn't super productive. I think that if you're the Eagles, you want somebody who's going to provide more of an immediate impact than somebody who's more developmental. Romello Height, Cassius Howell, and R. Mason Thomas fit the designated pass rusher bucket of really explosive athletes that move super well and also have very underrated hand usage, but don't really have the big frames to be every down pass rushers. They're realistically not going to be able to find like a proven commodity that's got high upside to replace the level of impact that Jalen Phillips had. But they're mostly going to be able to kind of pull from that bucket of designated pass rushers. And then lastly, the two guys, very different players that can be more every down defensive ends, pass rushers. TJ Parker from Clemson has a lot of upside, very explosive. He had a really good Senior Bowl, but his production did not step up this past year. Very similar to Keldrick Falk. He needs to play a lot better. Maybe Vic Fangio thinks that they can get something out of him. And I think that the one that might end up making the most sense is Akeem Mesidor, the Miami defensive end. He was just so good with using his hands. He is so refined, but he's a much older player. And I think that that's why it fits with what Philly needs, is that you're tapping into a prospect that is ready to go now, can maybe be a 7 or 8 sack guy or so in his first year. And that type of an impact is huge, or just as a pressure generator. Having somebody who you don't really need to come along because he's more developed, because he's an older prospect, fits that need of the Eagles trying to win as immediately as possible.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure and see what the Eagles do in this first round and just with their first 4 picks in this draft for sure. We're going to be talking about it more at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show well into the future. Again, folks, he is Joe DeLeone from A to Z Sports.com, the Joe and Ruffino Show as well. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. For God's sake, folks, you gotta listen to them. They're fantastic. Great content, great football content. Where else can they find you on the interwebs out there, Joe?
Follow me on X at Joe DeLeone, and you mentioned Ruffino and Joe, as well as A to Z Sports. Best pod available is the draft podcast that I do with my co-host Ryan Roberts, and we've got lots of great commentary that we've got for the upcoming draft. So much. Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me, and it's always great to catch up.
All right, we've got our good friend Josh Shuster from PhiladelphiaSoccerNow.com joining us right after our great discussion we just had with Joe DeLeone about some NFL draft prospects and what we may be seeing for the Philadelphia Eagles and just other teams around the NFL. A lot of great sports talk, and we're going to get into some more. Again, our good friend Josh Shuster from PhiladelphiaSoccerNow.com. We're supposed to talk about the Union, but they're 0-3, Josh. I don't even know if we should talk about them. Thanks for jumping on, buddy.
Anytime, Jeff. Anytime. They, the Union. We'll get into it. I would argue are actually off their worst start ever. But anyway, we can talk about that and debate that later. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Look, before we get into the Union talk, we also wanted to, folks, kind of discuss very briefly what really has been going on in the world of Philly sports with some of our beloved Philly sports teams. You know, as I mentioned, I was talking to Joe DeLeone about various draft prospects, you know, and even like who the Eagles might actually want to bring on board, because this week has been huge for this team in a lot of different ways. They have lost key defensive players in free agency, as we know. Nakobe Dean, Jalen Phillips, Reed Blankenship, all gone. I mean, we knew that the losses were going to happen. They stink. We know that they can't pay everybody. Howie wasn't able to do that. It's the state of the NFL business. We know that, Josh. But, man, I was really disappointed with Reed Blankenship and Nakobe Dean. Given what they've meant to this team over the past several years, they wouldn't have won a championship recently without these two guys. And I don't know. I'm disappointed, yet I understand the business aspect of this as well. What are your thoughts here with regard to how the Eagles are handling this offseason thus far? And by the way, as of us recording this here on Tuesday, March 10th, they still have not acquired anyone in free agency. I don't. What are your thoughts here? Concerns at all, or are you just like, okay, let Howie do what he does?
Yeah, I know that, normally when we do this, you'll say something and then I try to sway you more towards my way. But
Yes.
I actually agree with the word that you use, and I think that it's very appropriate. I would use the phrase disappointed because I think that when we look, like both of us are parents, right? So I'll kind of equate it to this. Like we have certain expectations of our kids, and when they don't do that, we get disappointed. We may not get angry, but we're kind of disappointed. I think that's exactly the way to look at this, the way the Eagles offseason has started here. We kind of knew they weren't going to have the money to do what we ideally would like them to do, or maybe what they normally do. But it's been just disappointing. We're kind of living in this different realm. And the reality is, Jeff, when you look at it, this is why in the NFL it is so hard to repeat, even just a second time as a Super Bowl champion. Because as soon as, whether a team wins or loses the Super Bowl, the value of the players on that team goes up because they've gone through a playoff run. And now you're at a point where, the NFL cap just continues to rise. And so you're going to have teams that have silly money to spend. And the reality is, I'm okay. I'm one of the few people that didn't want to bring Nakobe Dean back. And I say it in the sense that you drafted his replacement in the first round last year. He's often injured. I'm not saying he's not a good player. He's a very good player when he plays. But knowing the money he was going to command, you hit on all of these defensive draft picks. And now it's time to pay the piper. And just looking at it, you invested your first round pick last year in his replacement. You just couldn't pay him. And I didn't want to bring him back. What really was disappointing to me was Reed Blankenship.
Yes.
He is the leader on that back end. And so now not only do you have a position of a massive hole where you had to bring in Marcus Epps to kind of handle things, and no knock on Marcus Epps. He's not like an all-pro safety.
That was when Andrew Makuba went down.
Correct. After Makuba went down, they needed, because they didn't have depth. And that's the biggest problem. And where I'm getting to is that they just, this team does not have depth. And so I think I had started expressing this on post-game shows towards the end of the year last year with you. My concern is that we went from the beginning of the year where we were going to see our first round picks be luxury picks, best player on the board in a perfect world. To at the end of the year, I'm going, Jeff, we got a ton of holes. I mean, it's nice that they can go any avenue, but it's also not nice because now we're in a situation where this just isn't good. They have no depth. They have massive holes. And we're talking about trading AJ Green. Oh my goodness. AJ Brown. I don't know where I'm going. Anyway, AJ Brown.
We got Midnight Green in our brains here.
There you go. If you're going to trade AJ Brown, you're stuck with now creating yourself another hole. I don't know what's going to happen. I think that if this works out, it will probably be one of Howie Roseman's most successful off seasons, because it is just a very complex puzzle right now.
It is. Look, and Howie usually is a quote magician, as we've all known him to be during the course of the offseason. There's still moves that are going to be made. We know that this front office is one of the best in the NFL in terms of managing its money, its salary cap, contracts, moving money here and there. I do expect that as well, but you use the word disappointment. That's where I am right now. Again, as we're in mid-March, we're March 10th again, recording this. That's what I'm feeling right now. We still have the draft coming. That's going to be exciting. But I do have a huge concern about what this defense is going to look like for Vic Fangio. The pass rush, my goodness. Yes, Jalen Phillips, I honestly didn't think that they were initially going to be able to re-sign him. That was my initial thought. A lot of folks thought, they were going to give him the big payday. I didn't think that was going to happen. That obviously came to fruition as he's heading to Carolina. But I'm worried about what the pass rush is going to look like. So we're going to be talking about this a lot more here at the PST Podcast Show in the future, folks. But Josh and I also wanted to quick touch on a very important extension that was given to a player on the Philadelphia Phillies, and that's starting pitcher Jesus Luzardo, a 5-year, $133 million extension. He is going to be, God willing, with this Phillies team until 2031. He was initially acquired via trade from the Miami Marlins last offseason, and he has just been fantastic thus far for this team. I think this is a fantastic extension to be given, and I think it goes to show that this front office is still willing to invest, still willing to pay money. I mean, they're not doing crazy stuff necessarily like the Dodgers here at this point, but I'm glad that they're not afraid to say, you know what, this is going to be our guy. We love what we've seen from him, and we want to make sure we're investing in him.
Yeah, and I, when I saw this signing, you've met my son Jack. We've gone to the Lehigh Valley game before.
Went to the Iron
together.
Pigs. Yep.
Yeah, and one of the players he asks about, because at 8 years old, he's aware that not everyone is going to be back on the Phillies, right? So he was pretty bummed that Harrison Bader isn't on the Phillies anymore.
No, weren't we all?
So well, that's a whole separate story.
Yes.
But just being able to tell him that, because Jack is a lefty, and so he locks in on Christopher Sanchez, he locks in on Jesus Luzardo. He was very upset that Ranger Suarez is not on this team. You'll catch a theme here. They're all left-handed starters, right? Yep. And so being able to tell him was great. But I'm also happy for Luzardo. I mean, when Dave Dombrowski made that trade, I really only viewed it as upside. They didn't give up a whole lot to get him. It was kind of the Zach Wheeler situation all over again. An often injured pitcher that they're trusting their medical staff. Yep. And you know what? Luzardo pitched great. I think he was top 5 in Cy Young voting. Like there's a lot of really good things that have happened with that. And for whatever reason, the Phillies medical staff seems to be able to have these things fixed. It's good that we have the Phillies that follow the Eagles in this conversation, because they are in one category of Philadelphia sports. The other 3 teams are in what I put in the pain category. But both the Phillies and the Eagles are in this. It's not quite their turn yet. Yeah. You have the Eagles where they have won the Super Bowl, and that's great. The Cowboys are really chasing them down. They're signing defensive players and whatnot. And in baseball, it's the Dodgers. And unfortunately, I think the same thing's going to happen this year that happened last year, where the Dodgers, the team that hopefully the Phillies can make a run, because I do think that they can make a run, they would face off against the Dodgers, the NLCS again, hopefully. And it's not going to be the same Dodgers team, because what the Dodgers are doing is they're paying all these people. When somebody suffers an injury, they just let them sit out for a little while. And it's the same thing as last year. It was the pitching staff the Phillies faced was not the pitching staff of the Dodgers throughout the year that, didn't come out as the number 1 seed.
Right.
So anyway, the Phillies and Eagles are in one category, and the other teams are in another. But the Jesus Luzardo signing is good news.
It really is good news. Look, you talked about the pain teams, the pain tier. Like before we get into the Union, because they're definitely in that tier. The Philadelphia Flyers are certainly in the pain tier, dude. I can't take watching the games anymore. I can't take it. I want to so bad be invested in this Philadelphia Flyers team and this rebuild. I'm so tired of using the word rebuild, not only on this podcast show, but you just read about it everywhere. And because it's all we have. It's all we have. Last week on the show, it was all about the Flyers being in this holding pattern. It was a holding pattern. I'm tired of the holding pattern. And I know that you can't wave a magic wand. Danny Briere can't wave a magic wand. He's been working at it now for the past few seasons. But we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, something big has to happen with this team in order for us to believe that there is hope that the Flyers are going to be able to make some postseason noise at some point down the road, Josh. I'm not feeling that. And I'm getting to the point of being a Flyers fan for my entire life where I'm like, this ain't going to happen. anytime soon. We are definitely in that pain category right now, and I'm pretty tired of it.
Yeah, you had my buddy Dan Esch on, and I hop on his Christmas show and do some writing for his site. And I got news for you, Jeff. The Flyers actually haven't rebuilt, and I don't like that people use that terminology. Just because you lose, it does not mean that you are rebuilding.
Yeah.
The Flyers have been retooling, and that's what they've done. They've had the chance multiple times to be able to actually rebuild, but they chose to sign TK. They chose to not trade Sanheim. They chose to not trade Tippett. They chose, I can keep the list going. Dvorak is another prime example. They decided that they were going to sign him, a 30-year-old center
I know.
that is at best the third-line center in all reality. Just because he plays on the first line on your roster does not make him a first-line center.
They keep doing this.
They keep doing it. And so they sign him to this deal at $5 million per season while the cap's going up. And that's what I keep hearing with all these contracts. And it's like, well, if you keep telling me the cap's going up, then it doesn't actually work because you can't use that excuse for every contract.
Right. The
Flyers have not actually rebuilt. A rebuilding team doesn't pick at the highest at number 7, but most of the time winds up in the teens. That is a retooling team. Comcast, unfortunately, I don't think will ever let them do what they need to do. Statistically, it has shown with the last number of Stanley Cup champions, you need at least 2 players that you have picked in the top 3. And pretty much every single Stanley Cup winning team has done it. The Flyers don't want to do that. I don't know why. And so I have bad news, Jeff. This is going to be what it is. And that's why I say pain. And I'm giving Danny and Jonesy until the end of this offseason. They, for years, have now said the summer of 2026. The summer of 2026. Well, guess what? It's time to pay the piper. If you don't have a legitimate number 1 center or a legitimate number 1 defenseman, and I'm not talking where they view someone like Travis Konechny as a top line player. He's not. And Team Canada showed you that. They didn't even have him on the roster for the Olympics. So he's okay. He can play on the top line, but in a perfect world, he's an excellent second line winger. Like that's the reality of the situation. But because it's the Flyers, he's their best player.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pain, and the Sixers, we'll just throw them in there because they have 2 players on max contracts. One is suspended. The other one, you're tired of hearing a word. I'm tired of hearing a phrase. Embiid will be reevaluated. We're at the second time now in a short period of time that we've heard this. It's just you got 2 players that are. One is always injured. One is washed. Maxey is playing more minutes than he ever has because Nick Nurse doesn't have anyone other than him and VJ that can play. So they now have fallen down the standings. I think they're at the 8th spot right now, which means that they're going to have to play one of the top tier teams. They're not getting past the second round again. It's the same thing.
Same crap over and over. Thanks, Josh Harris. Appreciate you. Concentrate on the Commanders.
Hope that new stadium's going real well for you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, folks, look, we're going to take a break. And when we get back, we're going to get into some Philadelphia Union talk. Haven't discussed the Union in a while. We're going to dive into what this 2026 season may look like. Stick with us. All right, we're back with our good buddy Josh Shuster from PhiladelphiaSoccerNow.com. And we'd like to start to get into this Philadelphia Union season. Well, I don't know if we'd like to get into it, but that's what we're going to do.
On to something more positive, Jeff, in the Union.
Yes.
It's only the beginning of the pain.
Well,
anyway.
look, I mean, actually, before we even get to the Union and from what we may see from them this season, Josh, I want to get your thoughts on former Union midfielder Derek Jones being banned for life in Major League Soccer after being found guilty of violating the league's gambling policy. My gosh, I mean, kind of a bit of a shockwave that went through the MLS world. I just think, my opinion, just in general, and I'm kind of just out there all over the place on this one, the gambling world within sports, it's just crazy, as we know. Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. You have FanDuel, you've got DraftKings everywhere promoting everyone and their mother to gamble on sports. And of course,
inside arenas.
Yes.
You now can't go to games without seeing it. Yeah.
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is, yes, there are varying degrees and there are certainly fine lines with this stuff. And especially for professional sports athletes who are playing, and with regard to Derek Jones, he and some of these other folks who were found guilty, betting on their own teams. Yeah, not great. Shouldn't be doing it. But I'm just not surprised anymore when we hear these type of stories because of what the gambling world has become in the world of sports in general. What are your thoughts here?
In the situation with Derek Jones, it was just stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, one, you're betting on the team you're playing on, and two, one of the allegations is betting on whether he's going to get a yellow card or not. Like, what?
Yeah.
And that's so easy to control. Like, part of this is like in life, I look at it and go, sometimes you do something so stupid, you deserve to get caught. Like, in this case, I really can't feel bad. This isn't a case where you spent a little bit just talking about how betting is everywhere. There are a lot of guidelines. Like in the NFL, I know that you're not allowed to bet on NFL games, but you're allowed to bet on other sports outside of the facilities, right? Like, so even leagues aren't even saying, no betting whatsoever, because I think that's unrealistic.
Right.
I think addiction is a thing. I think players are going to do it. I think coaches are going to do it. I think in some cases it really is a disease that people can't help themselves with unless they get active help, and I hope that they do. But in this case, this is one of them where I'm like, dude, you did it to yourself. You kind of deserve it. I don't know what to say. I'm not going to feel sorry for you. The only thing I really feel is at least he's not a current player and not a superstar player where it's going to derail this amazing season the Union are off to.
That's a great segue.
There's sarcasm in case you're not watching and you're listening. There's sarcasm.
Right, absolutely. Like I said, a great segue because the Union are already 3 games into this season and they're 0-3 after losing significant talent during this offseason. We've spoken about some of that talent that's out the door, and my gosh, seeing Ty Baribo do what he did at the beginning of this season against this Union team. Look, the Union, they're off to their worst start since 2012. You said earlier, probably their worst start ever. They've only got 1 goal in 3 matches here. It's pathetic. So let's start the discussion about what our expectations should be for this team here in 2026. Again, we know a lot of the talent that was on this team and that was responsible for a lot of their success in 2025, not here anymore. This doesn't appear to be looking good for 2026, Josh.
No, but Jeff, if you recall, last year we were saying the same thing. It's going to be a bad season for the Union, yada, yada, yada. I want to be careful in how I talk about this. I was feeling bad for Carnell, and I was wondering what he did to ownership. That after last season, they did not reward him by giving him a competitive team. But then I heard him talking. Pulled up an interview, a post-match interview from the last game where he's talking about he's excited from what he's seeing from the young kids. And I'm like, dude, if this is your approach, I get you got to say some stuff, but I'm not feeling so bad. The way I view it is I'm going to bring the Flyers back into it because a lot of times when I talk soccer, I do try to bring in other sports to help people understand.
Help correlate. Yep.
And I'm going to bring in baseball too. There are teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, and that is really what the Union are. When you have a one-off where you either decide not to sell a player or you want to see if their value's any higher, and I'm going to use Ristolainen in this case from the Flyers.
Yeah.
Danny opted not to move him. Now, I thought that was a really stupid move. His value's never going to be higher, ever. But he feels that it can be, and he feels he didn't get what he wanted. I'm okay with that because they're not a farm system for the entire NHL. The Tampa Bay Rays very much are. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see players that succeed. They're going to get sold off, and that will lead to a good year here and there.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to enjoy that good year here and there. Are you ever seriously going to win a championship? Probably not. And that's the reality of the Philadelphia Union. They literally I mean, I guess I applaud them on capitalizing on selling players, but it's the same thing.
But where's it getting them?
Where's it getting them?
Yeah.
And this is the same thing that I've said, again, bringing the Flyers back in. I don't want Danny Briere trading for draft picks, because from what he's shown me right now, outside of Porter Martone, he cannot draft. So a draft pick does me no good. I'll take reclamation projects, but it's the same thing with the Union. They sell off, they trade away their draft picks for general allocation money, which very quickly, there's two ways to build in MLS, which makes it different than anywhere else. You can either build through the draft, which is the Americanized version. I hate it. I'm not going to get into it. So what the Union do, which I actually like, is they sell off their draft picks for general allocation money, which they can use to go purchase players. Here's the problem. The Union decide that they are the smartest guy in the room.
Right.
And sometimes this works, but they don't even go to legitimate leagues of soccer.
Right.
So the one time they've dipped into lower tiers of Germany, they come up with Kai Wagner, one of the best players that has ever put on a Union kit.
Yep.
The problem is that is the exception. The rule is they go to Denmark. They go to insert whatever random country you want into the fourth or fifth tier with someone who hasn't even started most of the season, and they're pumping $1 million or $2 million of a transfer fee. It's not working.
Right.
I'll give you Mikel Ua. Like, I can keep going of where this has not worked. Selling players off only works if you're reinvesting that money wisely, and they aren't doing that. Or they're pouring money into the development system, and frankly, the development system has not really been producing much.
They've been doing it for years. They've been doing that for years, and you're right. It
has produced over the years. But in terms of last year and this year,
but we're talking about that exceptional talent, right? And that leads me to believe that the expectations for this year probably should be pretty low. And I'm not just saying that because they're 0-3 at this point and have only scored 1 goal in three matches. Go ahead.
I would just say the reason why I think this is the worst start ever is because the one goal that they've scored, like, I'll be honest with you, it was a pity penalty kick that they were given.
Right.
And so really they shouldn't have even had that. Yeah. And they just look horribly disorganized. Like, there's some of that at the start of the season, like the first 4 weeks, the NFL are sloppy and all that. The difference in soccer is when you're bringing in people from other countries, they've been playing. Yeah. They've been playing, and the Union play a number of warm-up matches leading up to this. They go away to Florida. They bring in teams from other countries to do scrimmages. That doesn't really fly with me. This is they came in with really without a starting back line. I mean, it's bad. They are really in a bad spot. They sold off half of their defensive line in Glesnes and Wagner and replaced them with very unproven, very young, I don't know what's going to happen players.
Yes. Yeah. Look, let's move into the biggest strengths on this team. and we're going to be grasping for straws here. I mean, is the biggest strength goaltending at this point? Is it Andre Blake? I mean, is it Andrew Rick? Is that the biggest strengths on this team that we can really see? And what are your thoughts here?
No, Blake. It has been a rough season in net to start. I
don't know what's going on.
I would honestly say,
but I'm just saying from a historical standpoint,
Andre Blake is he is, but he's not young. I'm not. I would say the biggest strength is honestly the support of the fans, because that's literally, like, if we're talking real time, they're gonna do well with ticket sales. They have the Sons of Ben. They're gonna show up, and Sons of Ben have shown that they aren't afraid to hold the feet to the fire of ownership. And I have a feeling we're going to need that this year. So I'm going to give it to Sons of Ben. That's who's getting it this year.
All right. Very good. Well, let's flip the coin here. biggest weakness on the Union? There's certainly plentiful weaknesses. What are your thoughts here? I mean, maybe you have a list of 20.
Jeff, how much more time do we have? No, yeah. I'll leave it at this. I'm gonna try to be nice. I think the biggest weakness is a large level of inexperience.
I think that's fair.
One of my frustrations, and I'm going to bring up Kevin Sullivan again. He has played in a match, and he actually did very well. So why is he not playing at the MLS MLS matches? And so that's my bone to pick with Carnell right now. Like, you can only work with the ingredients you're given, right? As a chef, as a manager. So why aren't we playing him? Right? Like, he already has an agreement with Man City. So, like, we're not going to have him forever.
Right.
It's not like the season is off to this incredible start that we're afraid of starting a young kid is going to totally derail the season. You need to give the fans something.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I would just say inexperience.
And I mean, I think we're already seeing, of course, and it seems like stating the obvious because there's a lot of obvious weaknesses, but the defense, holy cow. Defense so far, not great. Not great.
I kind of equate it to that. I feel like Carnell is doing the same thing as Tocchet, where they have players who have played in certain positions for a while, but they refuse to use them there. It's kind of like, Jeff, I know you do the political thing and you've served on your council for a long time and all of that. But I said, hey, Jeff, that's cool. And I know that we have this open spot here in Cherry Hill on our council, but you know what I want you to do? I want you to go teach my wife's 3-year-old preschool class. And I'm not saying you can't do it,
right?
But I'm saying that's not where you're going to feel most comfortable. That's not where your strength is. That's not where your experience is.
Yeah.
We've got 2 coaches in Philadelphia doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, it's not great in certain areas, but I think when we are looking at these upcoming matches with the Union and, again, due to the talent that they lost in the offseason too, we're going to want to start seeing those players that need to begin that process of really stepping up more in 2026. I mean, yes, developing more. Defensively, I think we're obviously going to be looking at Frankie Westfield, and also from a goal scoring standpoint, Ezekiel Alado. That's how you say his name, right? I mess up names. Yeah. Ezekiel Alado. And I think that's what we're going to be. I think that's what the theme of this 2026 Union season is going to be, us seeing who is going to be stepping up and who is able to take those next steps to possibly get to any success. What are your thoughts here to close us out on those players you're going to really be keeping your eyes on to take that next step, Josh?
Not to dodge your question, but my answer is anyone.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't.
He's speechless.
I mean, you sent me these questions like 2 or 3 hours ago, and the other ones I was able to come up. I don't really have an answer for this one, and I mean that's a good news, bad news situation, right? Like, it's bad that I'm not expecting anything different from the very few veterans that they have on this team, even if they're only in their 20s.
Yeah.
But it can be good because that means that there's a lot of chances for new people to do new things. I would just say anyone.
Okay. Anyone at this point, folks.
And I'm never shy of words. Anyone. Anyone.
Folks, he is Josh Shuster from PhiladelphiaSoccerNow.com. That was the best. It was the best answer at the end of a discussion on the show. Just anyone. Come on, just anyone. Please.
Anyone. Just
please
do something. It's
please,
like
we got to pray. Anybody.
With a stick. Do something.
Yes.
Anyway. Oh my goodness.
Oh, buddy, it was great talking to you. Really appreciate it. Hey, let folks know where they can follow you on the interwebs out there if they want to connect with you.
Oh yeah, every time you normally cover this for me. I apologize.
Yeah, I forget. I forgot
I
this
normally
time.
am on top of these things, but yeah, I'm on X, not all the time, but I am on there as Fly Guy Josh 91. So feel free to give me a follow over there, or
All right.
go to Philadelphia Soccer Now and read the good work they're doing.
Yes,
So.
absolutely. Buddy, come back, join us. I love having you on all the time. I love our discussions. Let's talk more Philly sports in the future.
Sounds good. Anytime, Jeff.